Subscribe or they will haunt you.
What's your best true spooky story? Serious. Alt account because this is still a story that I don't want associated with my main account. It's not as spooky as some other stories on here I guess, but my SO and I are still a bit bewildered by it. It's been years and we still wonder about it occasionally. There's no explanation other than some weird supernatural connection or just a really big fucking coincidence. For about 10 years now, my Nana has been living in a nursing home. She had a stroke and mentally she is not all there. She still recognizes us when we visit and gets happy to see us. But she often talks gibberish, thinking she is in a distant memory in the past. It makes me sad because she and I always had a very close connection growing up. My parents both worked a lot and she would stay with me. She used to know when I was lying. She could always sense when I was sick, even when she wasn't over. And she and I are eerily similar both in personality and looks. There are pictures of her when she was 21 and it could be me in the picture. We were very close growing up and I love her dearly. I introduced her to my now husband when we started dating in college. He is from a different country than I am and I live in his country. So we had been dating a few years when my visa was going to expire. In order for us to live in one place, we decided to get married. However, we were still young, fresh out of university, and decided to just elope. We decided to get officially married at a courthouse while announcing our engagement, and then having a wedding a few years later. Official documents and wedding ceremonies are separated in my husband's country anyways. No one knew of our plan. We were and are still stupidly in love and thrilled to have such a crazy secret between us two. In hindsight, it was stupid and no one would have judged us, especially considering we are still happily together years later. But we still decided to hide it because we were stupid kids. So we flew to visit my parents in my home country and announce our engagement. And my dad picked us up from the airport. We were chatting in the car when he tells us that my Nana was freaking out while he visited her the other day. The day we decided to elope. Why was she freaking out? She announced to my whole family that she saw in her dreams that I had eloped and was now married. They dismissed her because they didn't expect that at all. She kept insisting and was incredibly lucid about it. She raised her voice, which she hadn't done since before the stroke. My dad had mentioned because he thought it was sweet that she was so worried about this and became so lucid. My husband and I just got silent in the car and I went cold. We don't know how she knew that or if it was just coincidence, but she knew somehow. We went to visit her a few days later and she didn't remember it at all. She was thrilled we were engaged. We are happily married now and had our wedding and stuff. And no one ever found out we had eloped before the wedding day, except my Nana apparently. Posted this in another thread but seems appropriate here. Edited slightly to fit thread. I have had several dreams similar to what I am posting. I've been a caver in Florida for about 13 years. Since I was about 6, and have been to a lot of caves. Never been afraid before this to go in one. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I started having this reoccurring dream. I would have it at least twice a year, always the same, even though I would realize I was dreaming after the first few iterations. I would fall asleep and dream of being in a cave and going into this little hole in the bottom. Inside I would see a 10-15 foot long corridor about 2-4 feet high. At the end it would always turn left, and I always saw a bent red stop sign at the end, like someone ripped off the top 2 feet and tossed it in. But I would always follow the corridor. I would turn and walk past the sign despite being scared, despite many times knowing what was there, and the corridor would start descending, quickly opening up into a large vertical chamber with the path leading down and a corkscrew. Everything became blurry at this point, but it was always the same. I saw trash scattered on the walls. I saw the pit leading down to a curved floor. I saw things, undefined animals or people or something else at the bottom. And I saw my family, each with one of the things, being tortured and killed every time, and I could never do anything. After I saw that, I would be stuck for a few seconds until I felt more than saw everything turn and look at me, and I would wake up. Not like a normal dream where you just drift to consciousness, or a nightmare where you bolt up in fear, but like something pushed me out, like I wasn't supposed to be there. So I have this dream multiple times a year until I turned 15. I did tell a friend about the dream before. What happens next? My father decided to take us to some caves we never had been before, one of which was Dog Drop. It was likely named so because someone either threw the pet in there or a coyote fell in and the body was later discovered. Dog Drop had a roughly 30-foot rappel straight down to enter. I went down with my brother while my father waited up at the top. There was a hole in the ground. I started to feel uneasy, though I didn't know why, so I followed my brother into the hole. I felt worse as I moved down, and when I looked up I saw the same corridor, the same turn, the same wall, the same bottles at the corner, and I instantly was hit with this overwhelming sense of nausea and fear, and being watched, and everything was screaming at me to leave. I froze and must have made some noise because my brother turned around and asked what was wrong. I managed to say I wanted to leave now, and climbed out as quickly as I could, followed immediately by my brother. We packed up and left. Never have gone back and never will. Haven't told anyone what actually happened. Just said I wasn't feeling well, and they forgot pretty quickly. The thing that really makes it creepy for me is I have never had the dream again. Year after year I would have it consistently, but it just stopped after that. But I still remember it all, and I still feel afraid, almost an external fear, when I think of it. At the time I was around 14, I asked my dad to wake me up early that morning at about 5 a.m. because I had some work to get done that morning. I was woken up and I flung my legs over the side of my bed. I felt a tug on both of them. What I thought at the time was just my dad trying to get me to hurry up. I reached over to pick up my phone and turned it on. 3:30 a.m. and I looked over at the black figure I assumed was my dad, and it was gone. Something similar happened to me. I was about 11 and I saw my dad standing in my doorway staring at me at like 4 a.m. I was so confused because he almost looked mad, so I called out to him. No response. I blinked and he was closer. I blinked again. He was at the foot of my bed. I pulled my covers over my head and started screaming. Also IDKY, but doppelganger dad had boxers with flamingos on it, and when my parents came running to my room, he had on his Flintstone pajama pants. I asked, and apparently he does not in fact own flamingo boxers. Back when I was a kid, my grandmother had a really close friend who used to help her babysit us. One day she goes missing. Family doesn't know where she is, and we don't either. About a week later, police find her body in a dumpster. She had been dead for 4-5 days. She had been mugged and had several stab wounds. Incredibly tragic. Who would mug an old lady? Here's the spooky story. A few days just before she was found, my 3 cousins swore they saw her walking around in their backyard and knocking on their window. The following day had search going through the area. It wasn't until the body was found that we realized what they saw couldn't be true according to police timeline, but they swore it was her. Edit. I'm adding more context for the story. I initially kept it brief because I didn't want to have a wall of text, but since this blew up a bit, I'll include more details. The backyard was actually pretty big and long because it was shared by the entire apartment complex, which had 4 units, 2 upstairs, 2 down. My cousins were in the downstairs unit on the left. Again, like I said in a different post, it was gated on all sides by wooden fencing. My cousin's window had blind spots so you couldn't see the entire backyard. It wasn't nighttime, but the sun was setting. They said it was almost down at this point, so I assume around 7 p.m. They're in their room, which has a window that sees into the backyard. It was ghetto and they were pretty poor, so their beds only had a mattress, not the frame supporting it. It was a queen and a single pressed up against the wall with the window. So basically, to look into the backyard. You were standing up on a mattress looking against how you normally face, back against the wall, sitting down on the mattress. Youngest brother, holy shit, there's someone in the back. She just walked away. Oldest laying down on the bed. WTF are you talking about? Youngest, dude, it looks like old lady. She's walking around where grandma's vegetable garden is. Oldest, youngest, come fucking look. She's just walked away. Oldest goes and looks. I don't see anything. Stop being stupid. Goes back to laying down. Little one stands there looking at him. Middle brother comes to look a moment later. Oh shit, she's right there. WTF, she's coming to us. They all look to see the lady knocking on the window. They scream, panic, and run out to Dad. Dad obviously doesn't believe them, but after a bit gives in. He goes out and checks. Nothing. So just a side note, the way these apartments were connected, you couldn't go into the backyard from your individual unit. You had to get out into the main hall, which had a door that opened into the backyard. I'm from Scotland, and when I was a child, my mum and dad took my sister and I on a trip to Fort William, which is a town up in the Highlands. People go there for skiing and hiking. It was in winter, so we were there to do some easy hiking. My sister and I were quite young. I was about 11, and to stay for a couple of nights. I can remember the name of the hotel we stayed at, but I do remember that it was old-fashioned, and we were all in one room together. There was a single bed where I was sleeping, a double bed in the middle, my parents were there, and another single on the other side, my sister. I was often frightened when I was a girl. I didn't like the dark, and I was super scared of the possibility of ghosts, etc. I never found it easy to sleep because of this. Even at home, I vividly remember tossing and turning that first night in the hotel for a long time before lying on my back and trying to calm myself down. I then felt the bed sink a little next to my feet. I heard the creak of the old mattress. Someone was sitting at the foot of my bed. My heart was honestly pounding. I hadn't heard my sister or parents get up, so I was terrified. Whatever was sitting there quickly moved, so it was sitting on my feet. I felt the weight of whatever it was. I heard the mattress creak again. My feet were freezing cold. It then moved off my feet and settled down next to them again. The old mattress shifted and creaked again. Within a second or two, I felt the coldest I ever felt, but not throughout my whole body. The coldness was slowly rising up from my feet, accompanied by a feeling of pressure. I was too scared to open my eyes. I was willing myself to call for my mom, but I was so scared that I just could at first. When I managed to shout out and wake the rest of my family, the cold, pressured feeling had reached up to my knees. When the lights were switched on, the feeling vanished. I'm sure this will get buried, but I've got one. It's more bittersweet spooky than spooky, but here goes. My ex had this lamp that she had on the island in our kitchen. She turned it on pretty much every night, and in the mornings to make coffee. It was a pretty solid little lamp. I brought my cat to live with us late in our relationship because she had dogs, and my cat was pretty up there in age and not used to dogs, so I tried to spare her little heart from that shock. She came to love laying down in the spot by where the lamp plugged into an outlet on the wall of the island. She died soon after I brought her over, and I was absolutely heartbroken. I had a hard time accepting the loss. About a week after my cat died, my ex was grinding coffee in a little electric grinder, and I heard her shriek from the other room. I rushed over to see what was going on, and she told me she felt something cold pass by her feet. Then the light on the lamp started flickering. She tried to show me again the flickering, but it didn't happen. I just chalked it up to her being weird. At 6 a.m. a couple of days later, she asked me to make coffee for her. I grabbed the grinder, flick on the lamp to see what I was doing, and sure enough, the same thing happened to me. A cold wind whipped past me like a cat running around my feet. Then the light on the lamp flickered before I could even get the grinder going. It never happened before or after, despite the hundreds of times I'd used that grinder in the same outlet as the lamp. I like to think it was my little girl saying goodbye one last time. Okay, so this was probably 15-ish years ago now. When I was in high school, my group of friends used to spend a lot of time at a particular friend house because it was huge. It was also quite an old house, but his parents were cool with us basically taking over when we were there. We make dinner for about 10 people, stay up late listening to music and playing video games, and they never minded. Anyway, one evening we all sitting in his room, watching TV. It's dark and the lights are on but the curtains are open. Suddenly two different people on opposite sides of the room jump like they been startled and look around. Both of them explain they saw in the reflection in the window on the second floor. Just FYI, somebody walk across the room. None of us had moved. It freaked a few of the girls out and we had to calm them down a bit. Flash to a couple of weeks later, and we found a pack of cards in our friend house that had letters on them. Somebody suggested we could use these as a Ouija board and figure out if our friend house was actually haunted. We got a big wooden board. I think it might have been the top of a table once upon a time. Arranged the cards in a circle around the edge with an extra 2 homemade yes no cards. Got a glass and off we went. It started to answer questions, telling us it was a man who used to live in the house and who died there. We asked when he died and just got the answer long. We asked if he was moving the glass and he said yes. This is where I decided to be dumb and I asked if he could move anything else other than the glass. Yes. We all paused and listened for the sound of something moving, but nothing happened. We asked if he had moved something. Yes. Nothing happened again, so we moved on and asked some more questions. This was at 10:30 p.m. After a while longer we said goodbye. I think at least one of us was aware enough about Ouija board lore to know we had to close the conversation properly. And then a little later we all went home. A little spooked but enjoying it nevertheless. I walked home with another friend who lived nearby. As I walked in my front door, my mom called through to me to be careful in my room because a mirror had fallen off the wall earlier and they weren't sure if they picked up all the bits of glass. When I asked when this had happened, she told me about 10:30. The same time I asked the spirit to move something. I did not sleep well that night.